welcome to the third edition of ALTIUS Answers. My name is Stephanie Dorwart, and I am the host and owner of ALTIUS Healthcare Consulting Group. I am super excited today to be here with Erin Whitehead, the executive coach and owner of KickTheCeiling.com. Today, we're going to talk a lot about strategic planning, strategy, physician practices, and what physicians and providers can do to really elevate their performance. Erin focuses on results. Really her practice is focused on making sure that everything that her providers and clients do is market focused, that understands where their competitive advantages are and exactly what they have to do to move forward. In our environment, a lot of providers learn all of the clinical information, all of the background that they need, but they don't necessarily know how to move forward. What should they do to elevate the practice? What should they do to move forward? So Erin, welcome here today. I'm so excited to have you on our podcast, and we can't wait to hear what you have to share with your providers and what they might be thinking about right now.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I love being here. I love being able to spread the message. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Perfect. We're so happy to have you here. One of the things that I thought would be important to start with is to really hear what drove you to move your practice into this area. We all have passions in our work and reasons that we started what we did and
Yes.
stories behind our careers.
Yeah.
If you could just give our listeners a little bit of background into what led you to become really passionate about this and really what drives you on a daily basis.
Sure. So in a nutshell, about 4 years ago, roughly, I decided to do a cannonball off the high dive, which basically meant I
Always fun.
completely, yeah, screaming Eureka on the way down, which basically meant that I wasn't being fulfilled anymore. I had been working for 25 years in business, being very successful, but I was waking up every day just not feeling as though I was living my purpose. And one day I just said, enough. I quit everything that I knew. I drove home jobless with no plan. And I just said, however long it takes, I'm going to make sure that I find what that purpose is. And I'm not going to stop until I do. And I took a bit of an inward journey. It was a little more than 6 months, but roughly about that time. It was very dark and there were a lot of tears. And anyhow, when I emerged from it, I just saw the light and I just realized there were pieces of my life that I had been doing that I loved so much, but so much of it was what everybody else wanted me to do or wanted me to be. And I just wanted to be myself, doing what I love. And how can I marry all of this together? And so I knew that my first and foremost purpose is to help others. And secondly, is competitive strategy. And so I wanted to marry those two things together and figure out how can I wake up every single day and help people with competitive strategy. And that is really how Kick the Ceiling was born. And the name Kick the Ceiling really comes from all of the self-limiting perceptions of myself that I had to deal with. The fear of failure and judgment from others and what are people going to say and think if I put my ideas out there. And once I learned how to curb it and to really attack my day without so much fear and really casting that fear to the side, I was able to move forward with Kick the Ceiling. And now I help teach doctors how to be as expert in competitive strategy as they are in medicine. And I wake up every day jumping out of bed, so excited. I love being able to help others that help other people. I really feel like being a doctor is a calling. And so the majority of doctors don't go to business school and rely so heavily on consultants and others to help guide their business. And that's where I wanted to be most useful.
I love that. Our mission at Altius is to really help hospitals remain independent and help community
Mm-hmm.
hospitals thrive and or partner with others. So mission's so important to me. And I know I get super excited when I jump out of
Yeah.
bed in the morning and I'm able to help a
Yeah.
hospital. So I think we share that in common.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
So mission is really important. It's important to you with Kick the Ceiling. And I love
Mm-hmm.
the name Kick the Ceiling because we're all trying to strive to be better every single day. A lot of times I simply want to be better today than I was yesterday.
Sure.
And with the doctors that you're helping, I'm sure a lot of times they have a hard time really defining what their mission is. They know they want to help their patients, they want to do the best that they can for their patients. But when they're starting out, what do you do to help them define their core mission and communicate it?
It's a great question. So, oftentimes when I work with them directly, they have either one of two things: an idea of what the mission needs to be, or they have a mission statement that seems to look more like a paragraph, where it's so many sentences and there's so much going on in it that it seems to be more of a lengthy purpose statement, if you will. So, it's got a purpose statement in it, it's got a vision statement in it, it's got a little bit of a mission going on. And really, what we do is really home in on what is it that you want to accomplish? What is the horizon? What are we looking at? When your employees wake up every day and show up to work, what is it that they're working toward? So, not only crafting that mission statement, but certainly communicating it to the employees as well is super important. But yeah, we have to put pen to paper and we have to start jotting things down. And what is it that you want your practice to grow and be? And that's what the mission is every single day. And a lot of times when we do strategic planning, one of the first things I say is we shouldn't have to touch the mission statement. If it's in place, we shouldn't have to touch it. Sometimes we have to do a little revising, but very, very rarely. And if you think about some of the other bigger companies out there, like Google or Nike, they don't touch their mission statements. Their mission statements remain the same, and they do so for 5 years, 10 years, or longer. So mission is really important. And if we have to craft it from scratch, we really have to focus on what that looks like. And the words are very important. They have purpose behind them. And when you hire new employees, it's something that they can really rally around.
So mission statements stay in play for longer periods of time. We
Mm-hmm.
rally around it. We really get the employees engaged, and they're so important.
Right.
Once you have the mission statement and you're starting to think about strategy and strategic planning, what should doctors do if they're thinking, I know my mission, we have it cemented, where do we go from here? What are the things that you would first do with a practice whenever they're looking for the strategy?
So if we want to put a strategic plan in place, there's certain frameworks that you can do that always tend to work. I think everything builds from the mission, so it's really important that that gets put together first. It's the foundation for everything, and it can't really have any cracks in it. But from there, I like to move to a vision statement. Not everybody has a vision statement, and not everybody wants a vision statement, so that I feel is more optional. But core values, that's what's next. So, really, what are the values that we're working for and toward every single day? And when we're hiring employees, what are those core values that we're looking for in those people that we're going to place into the practice? Um, you know, it could be 3 values, it could be 5 values, it could be 7 values, but whatever they are, you need to come up with those, not me. You need to decide what they're going to be as the CEO of your practice and their values that you don't waver from. So when you have an employee that's on the fence and you're not sure whether or not this is someone who needs to stay with the practice, or these are employees that we're thinking about, or potential employees that we're thinking about hiring in, do they exude these core values? So it's something that we definitely go back to. So yeah, mission, core values, definitely for sure. And it's actually interesting because it takes a little bit longer to come up with a mission statement from scratch than you think. But when it comes to core values, usually people know. They say, this is what I want a core value to be. This is what I want a core value to be. And it's very purposeful, and it's very intimate to the person who's drafting this. And it's great to see that too, because then you can start to see things sort of falling into place where you're right. If I am hiring new employees, I definitely want them to be transparent. I definitely want them to be creative, or whatever your core values happen to be. It starts to piece together. It feels good.
Yeah, that's really interesting. A lot of times I feel people don't spend enough time on the core values, and
Yes.
sometimes they lift them from other places. And I
Right.
think the core values really have to be close to your heart and
Yes.
important to you. Because if you
Yes.
lift them from somewhere else, they're not going to resonate, and then it's
Right.
not going to really propel your organization to the next level. So they have to mean something. They're very personal and need to really be thoughtful.
Yes, Absolutely, 100%, 100%.
So I'm sure you get called into a lot of different situations. And before we get into more details about the process, without naming names or without giving away too much, what have been some of the challenges your clients face, and what are the reasons that you're brought in?
So the number one reason that I get called in is because the practice is feeling some type of choke point. And it's not necessarily a choke point in a backslide in revenue, but a choke point of we don't know what to do next. Oftentimes, the practice managers, as great as they are, a lot of them have tended to be promoted within the ranks. They not they don't necessarily have the business acumen necessarily when it comes to market growth or competitive strategy, and the doctors usually have not been to business school. And so people, what happens is the practices are trying new things and nothing seems to be sticking necessarily. Now they'll try new things and they'll might see an uptick or a spike, for example, in revenue, and they'll think, hey, maybe we got it. But over the long haul, perhaps it's not sticking and they just don't know what to do next. That's the number one reason why I get called is um, they don't call and say, we don't have a strategy in place. I think we need one. They say, something's going on with the business and I just can't put my finger on it. And it's great because as an outsider, we have the ability to be able to come in with fresh eyes and, point out probably a number of different things and really isolate some of the issues that we see. And if you've been in business for a while, those things tend to jump out at you like red flags. Some a little more prominent than others, but that's the number one reason why I get a phone call is I just don't know what to do next. So it takes a lot for somebody to pick up the phone and say something like that too. It's really vulnerable. So the majority of the phone calls that I get are from the doctors. They're not from the practice managers.
Yeah, it's so important because we work with, hospitals and healthcare systems, and sometimes I feel like they wait too long to pick up the
Yes.
phone and call. So the
Yes.
advice that I have is as soon as there's that little bit of unknown or some reason that they're nervous or not sure, pick up the phone and call
Yes.
earlier than later because the sooner you get started on defining your vision, defining your mission, defining your strategy, the better off the practice will be.
Absolutely. And that's such a great point too, because most of the time when I get a phone call, it is 2 years after the fact. And they've really been running in circles and they just don't know what to do or how to do it. Or they've brought in other types of consultants that haven't been able to necessarily identify or isolate what those specific choke points are. And although they may have offered some good advice, it didn't actually help the inherent problem. Yeah.
So we walk in a lot of times and there's the 3-ring binder sitting on the shelf.
Yes.
And there's a lot of good data, a lot of great advice in there, but none of it was ever acted upon or
Right.
implemented or actually made sound strategic
Right.
decisions. So, what would you advise to practices, even if they've worked with you or they have the strategy, they have the plan, how do you implement it?
It's such a great question because there are so many corporations out there, medical or not, that actually take the manpower and the time to come up with some type of strategy and some type of plan and then fail to execute it, which is always interesting to me, to be honest. However, failure to execute is the number one reason why businesses call me as well. Um, you have to have accountability built into the strategic plan. So every plan that I help co-create, accountability is always built into it. So it's one thing to build this great, beautiful plan that has great vision and is actually feasible. And then if you don't build accountability into it,
Not going to go
not
anywhere.
much is gonna come from it. Right. So it's super important to do that. If you're not building accountability into your plan, build it in today. You're going to see a whirlwind of change probably. The second piece of that is to track what's going on. So not only do you need to implement it and execute and hold people accountable, but track what it is that you're doing and allow people to see all of the positive that's coming from this. And it's a great way to notice whether or not you need to iterate on some of those tactics. Perhaps we thought they were going to work and we put them in place, and 3 months later we feel like we need to iterate. And you're not going to know that unless you're tracking. So, I mean, your plan can be so beautiful and collect dust on the shelf, and you're going to be tearing your hair out, and it's just going to be horrible. And I see it so much. So if this sounds like you, just know that you're not alone in this. It happens more often than you think. And when I go into a practice and I'm there on site with the staff, they're really excited that I'm there and they're hoping for all these changes, but I have to turn to them and say, guys, this is not about me. This is always about you. You have to be able to take those first steps, and you have to be able to make the hard decisions. You have to be able to move forward. You have to track it. You have to hold yourselves accountable. It's a big, beautiful circle. It's a big, beautiful circle.
You touched upon some great points, a lot of highlights there. Number one, it's a plan that you co-create. So it has to be owned by the provider and the staff. So this isn't Erin Whitehead's plan, it's the practice's
Right.
plan. And it's co-created, and ultimately they have to execute it. And number two, the accountability
Yes.
structure, you have to track against things and pivot if you need to.
Yes, absolutely. And, it's one of the things that I caution when I speak to any of the doctors and the practices that I work with is, do not allow me to walk into your practice with a beautiful plan that I've created all by my lonesome, because more than likely, I just created that plan for someone down the street, and it's a carbon copy. We have to start your plan from scratch. We have to do it together. You know your patient base better than I do. Even if I do all the market research, you have touch points with your patients, and you know how they will react to some of the ideas that we talk about. And it's so important that we do it together, and that it's not just the C-suite or the doctor, him or herself. It's that we get everyone involved. So everybody who has touch points with your practice, and although you might find it a little odd, but even if you work with medical device companies, everybody has an outside perspective, and even the person who's answering the phone, all of these people should help in creating the strategic plan. And when you co-create it, you'll often find that most of your employees, if not all of them, will become cheerleaders for this plan. It won't feel arduous to execute this. It'll feel more like a pleasure. The employees will start getting excited about it when we have the launch, and it won't seem like you're handing it down and, the manager says you have to do this, and it's because the manager said so, and now we have all of these new things that we want you to do, and, get to it, we're tracking you. So, yeah, I'm sure you've heard some of these stories as well.
What an amazing concept, though, that people have stake in the plan, that they put in
Yes.
place their imprint in it. And I love getting all stakeholders involved,
Yes.
starting with people that are manning the phone
Mm-hmm.
to the medical equipment. Everyone in the practice should really touch that plan and be
Yes.
involved in it, because that's going to have the best
Yes.
outcome.
Yes. And your medical device reps and your pharma reps and even your patients, they want you to do well, and they want to be able to help you co-create something that's going to help everybody succeed. So you'll find less pushback than you think.
So one of the articles that I was looking at on your blog talked about 5 mistakes that you might be making in your practice in regard to strategy. And I really loved the advice to stop ignoring reality. And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about, where maybe people wait too long to pick up the phone, or the doctor's a little nervous about making any changes. But the message to stop ignoring reality, I think, can apply before you have a strategic plan and once you start to implement it. Could you just expand on that a little bit? And even if you want to talk about some of the other mistakes.
So stop ignoring reality is basically, you can't think that you can know everything. And when you understand that there is a point in time in the business where the knowledge and expertise that you have isn't where it needs to be in order to take the business to the next level, you have to stop ignoring the fact that you believe you can do this and really reach out to someone who can help you. There are signs all over the place. It could be found either in your revenue, it could be found in attrition inside your practice where, there's constant turnover, multiple other things. Your patients are not retained, things like this. And when those things immediately, if they start to happen, you need to reach out and talk to a consultant who has expertise in this field, who can actually help you and point some of those things out. And remembering that you are the CEO of your practice, not your practice manager, which a lot of doctors get backwards. And the practice managers are one of the first people to tell me how much it is that they have on their plate. And they also confess that at times they don't know what to do next, but yet they're not communicating that to the doctor. So the doctor thinks that everything is going well, and the practice manager is basically sweating like crazy, not knowing what to do next, and afraid to talk to the doctor and say, hey, I don't know what I'm doing here. We need to call in some outside help. So you have to stop ignoring this reality that you have, that everything is hunky-dory, everything is fine. We'll get through this patch, because if the patch has lasted and continues to last and continues to go down this road, you might pick up the phone and it's too late, where you have this downward spiral and it's really hard to come back from. So the moment that you understand this and that you're okay with being vulnerable and reaching out and saying, listen, here's something that I don't understand, please help me with it, right? I would say 100% of the doctors that I know outsource their marketing and their search engine optimization and their website design. Why would you not outsource the health of your practice and making sure that the business is being run optimally, and making sure that you are operating on a competitive landscape as well, and taking care of the health of your business just like you take care of the health of your patients? So it's synonymous to me.
Yeah, I think in healthcare, sometimes we often overlook the business aspect of it. It's
Mhm.
so important to have strong quality care, but without profitable business, the patient care really isn't going to happen. So
Right.
it's that balancing act. And I think the providers sometimes get into the, I'd say the treadmill. They're
Mm-hmm.
on that daily treadmill of 17 patients, 20 patients. They don't stop to
Yeah.
pause and actually
Yeah.
look and see what should we do. And that's where a coach
Right.
and an executive consultant comes in so handy. I know even in my own personal practice and with our companies, sometimes I just have to stop and have someone else look at things. And I've learned that using coaches isn't a negative reflection on my abilities or my confidence. I
Right.
need someone else to help guide us to the next step. And I think that's so important for doctors to realize.
Absolutely, 100%. And I can tell you that after I start working with them, it's almost like this huge sigh of relief, um, where sure, we can take quantitative measures and say, is there ROI in working with Erin? But I will tell you the number one measure is qualitative. And they'll say, I don't know exactly what it is that you're doing, but whatever you're doing, it's working. And I feel so much better. It's like the stress has been lifted. They feel like they're more energized. Oftentimes, instead of working in the business on the business aspects that they don't understand, now they've created more time with family or more time for hobbies or some other things that they enjoy, where all of the other stuff that was really dragging them down is now sort of reined in and corralled, and that there is a path forward and we can all sort of see the light. It makes for a much better day in the office, if you will.
Yeah, it really focuses it on mindset, where,
Yeah.
mindset is so important. And a lot of times, if your mindset isn't right, you're not going to be able to tackle some of those day-to-day activities. So I think getting your strategy right and the planning, have someone that can help point out what you need to do, can really help take you to that next level. Now, in
Yes.
today's environment, things are changing. There's a lot of, I'd say chaotic factors that are disrupting practices and the way we've traditionally provided care. Telehealth's moving in, there are other
Yes.
components. What are some of the key areas that really help your practices focus on right now that maybe they haven't thought of in the past?
I would say a real strong focus on hiring the right talent. I find a lot of times all of a sudden someone quits and now we have to throw up a job description ASAP or hire whoever it is that some of the other medical staff knows just so that we can fill that spot because we have patients to serve and we're trying to fight this constant fire. It's one of the number one things that I love to focus on is what are the tactics and how are we hiring the talent that we're hiring in? So when I ask practices, this is one of the questions that I ask them is what differentiates you in the market? So I'll ask it to the medical staff, I'll ask it to the administrative staff, and I'll ask it to the doctor or doctors. And usually the number one answer I get is, oh, it's our staff. You know, not only is our doctor fantastic because they all actually believe in the ability of the doctor and doctors, but they say it's our staff. It's our staff what makes us the best. And I push back on this answer all the time because Dr. A, Dr. B, and Dr. C actually have access to the same talent pool as everybody else does. So if you're putting applications up on Indeed or you're listing them on your website or however it is that you're putting the word out, that same talent pool can be picked up by any of the doctors in the area. And so really what it is it comes down to the tactic. Where are you going one step further to make sure that you're hiring the type of talent that not only has the cognitive ability to perform the job, how they will behave under a stressful situation, which oftentimes you find in medical, and are they interested in it? So a lot of times we find, oh yeah, well, we thought so-and-so was going to work out, and then 3 months later, we found out it wasn't a great fit. And so that's the number one thing that I like to focus on is how are we hiring? Because it seems to be one of the choke points too when I go in is yes, we've got, you know, really solid rock stars, but then we have all of this other talent that we don't feel are as much of a rock star, or they're weighing us down, or something like that. The culture of the practice and or multi-practices is, you know, dragging down. That's one thing that I love to focus on is hiring.
Yeah, I think hiring the right staff is extremely important. It really drives employee engagement. It drives the
Yeah.
culture, as you mentioned. And if you hire right in the first place, you're going to reduce your turnover in the future. So
Yes.
making sure you bring in the right people on. But I also think it's important sometimes to touch upon firing the right people. We never want to talk
Yeah.
about firing, but we often will walk into hospitals and they might have a practice that has a toxic person, or they've
Yes.
allowed someone to remain there that, it's really not driving patient performance. They have poor
Yeah.
quality. They're not able to perform their job at the level that they should. How do you
Yeah.
coach providers to deal with those situations?
This is a tough one, and it tends to walk a fine line. As an outsider, when I come in, one of the first things I notice is which personality really stands out and why do they stand out? Is it because of toxicity, or is it because this is an A player, likes to rally the team, you know, good things are happening, and toxic workplaces breed. And you can usually find what I like to call patient zero. It's the one person that loves to breathe the rest. And we all know misery loves company. And when everybody is on their lunch break and they're all hovered around the water cooler, you know, this is the one person that continues to drive all of the complaining and all of the negativity. And you know, if that person were to be removed, things would just lighten up and air would lighten up. So if it's one thing I know about doctors, it's that they're extremely loyal. And when it comes to terminating an employee, it's one of the hardest things that they are ever faced with. They don't like to do it. I usually don't like to advise this unless it's absolutely necessary. The first step I like to do is to sit that employee down and ask them how they are. Like, how are you? Because you know just as well as I do that it's really hard to leave your life at the door, that we all
Yep.
have a personal life, and when we come to work, we can't just leave it at the door. It comes in with us. Some people are better than others at balancing the two, whereas some are not as good at balancing. And sometimes it's just really figuring out whether or not they had a life-changing event happen in their life, or is there a way that we can help you? So that's the first angle that I like to take, rather than coming in and sort of bulldozing. But yes, there are times where you do have an employee who is extremely toxic, and really it's about getting the doctor to focus on the horizon and what is life going to be like if this employee here continues. Is that this is not going to be the employee who quits, it's going to be the 12 employees that are surrounding the one, because it's the culture that they don't want to be a part of, and you have the ability to help that culture elevate. You have the
Yeah, I
ability to make this
absolutely agree with
decision.
that. I love the fact that address coaching the employee and talking to them, because sometimes if you can actually understand what they're bringing to the table and what's causing the
Yeah,
behavior, they're going to
yeah,
change. We all want to do a good job. We
yes,
start our days, we want to go to work, we want to make a difference, we want to have a good experience. We don't necessarily come in wanting to have a bad day and have a negative attitude. So I think
right,
trying to take people that are in that bottom, sometimes they can be raised up
yeah.
and they can do a good job in taking away those underlying causes. They can change things, but coaching is so important.
Is absolutely. And it's such a great way, really, because as an outside business consultant, when the doctor announces that there's a new person who's going to be coming in and basically joining the team as the consultant, there is a level of uncertainty that starts to happen, and people start to fear, oh my gosh, am I going to lose my job? Because they really don't know what's happening and why I'm there. So it's one of the first things that I address, is that I'm really here to help the doctor, and to point out if there's any choke points or there's any gaps, and really try to ease fears. Because when you bring somebody in from the outside for reasons unknown to medical staff, they get a little weary. So it's my job to make sure that I ease those fears and make sure that we can all play on the same playing field, and that I really try my hardest to build the trust level with the team as quickly as possible so that we can get things done.
Yeah, anytime you bring someone from the outside in, it's really important to set the stage for why they're there.
Yeah,
And usually the reason you're bringing outside expertise is because you want to make things better for the employees that are working with you.
yes,
You want to
yes,
set a better future. So setting that stage, communicating, and really helping
yes.
everyone understand what you're hoping to get on the back end.
Yes, absolutely. And I love that too, that you mentioned that, because communication seems to usually be one of the top two things that's lacking. When I step foot into a practice, no one is on the same page. I can tell you that right now. I don't step into practices that are well-oiled machines with no choke points and everything is beautiful and doves are singing and things are happening. That is not the case. And communication has a lot to do with it, where you can have silos that are built inside the practice where you can have great communication within those silos, but each department doesn't know what the other departments are doing, and nobody knows, how the practice is running overall, what's the health, what is the finance team responsible for, what is billing do on a daily basis, things like that. You have to communicate. And just like you have to execute a strategic plan, you have to communicate the strategic plan and what it is and why we're building it and what it's going to do for the practice and for you as an employee, what that means for you and how you can really take what it is that we're doing and spread your wings and really shine. You really have the chance to leverage this as an opportunity, honestly.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity for everyone within the practice to really work together and you give the practice wings. And in today's competitive
Yeah.
marketplace, it's so important to work together and really drive
Yes.
toward that mission to make a difference.
Yes, absolutely.
So we're seeing a lot of change in healthcare right now. A lot of practices are being acquired.
Yeah.
Some are no longer dependent.
Yeah.
You know, when you work with a practice or work with a hospital healthcare system on how to manage their practices, what are
Yeah.
some of the steps that you take to make sure that the transition's successful? So once they've been acquired, what has to happen? How can they ensure it continues to be a successful transition?
This is a really great question, because when a practice is acquired, there's a myriad of reasons why this happens. However, the employees are a big factor into acquiring that practice, because you acquire the talent as well So it's super important that you ease those fears of the employees. And what does that roadmap look like? Because now you technically have a new employer, if you will, if the doctor's also retiring, for example, and not coming along with the practice. And what does that look like for the employees? That's the number one thing that needs to be addressed, is calming the employee fears. And then, next it would be, how can we make the transition more seamless? So, for example, there could be, usually if it's a hospital acquisition, a lot of the same things and measures stay in place. There's just a new body of individuals in whom things sort of filter to. For example, billing, something like that, or finance, or HR, something like that. So just ensuring that we're communicating that to the team. If it's a change in employer where a doctor is retiring and then a new doctor is acquiring the practice, then we have to make sure that everybody understands what those expectations are. And a lot of it comes from the strategic plan. So if you are selling your practice or you're looking to acquire, you want to make sure that you have a strategic plan in place. It's one of the pieces of due diligence that the financial team will ask for, among a myriad of tons of other reports that you'll have to turn over, is, do you have a strategic plan in place? And oftentimes, if you do, and it's been in place for longer than 3 years, the chances of your valuation being stronger is greater. So think about that. So if you're within retirement of about 10 years or so, this is something, if you haven't done yet, you need to get in place ASAP. Because when you hit that 5-year mark and you're 5 years out of retirement, this is not really the time to begin everything. You should have started this a little, few years beforehand. But get those strategic plans in place, because it'll teach you, how to build a plan, what goes in the plan, what's needed to be successful, how often you need to revisit the plan, what it takes to iterate or completely pivot sometimes, how to be more agile when you're working with a strategy, faster decision making and things like this. So your strategic plan is going to speak volumes, because if you have an acquisition and the employees have a strategy in place and they know what their job function is and what they are accountable for, most likely the transition will be much more seamless than if you don't have one in place and your employees are fearful and they don't know what's next and everybody's sort of running around like chickens now. And at the end of the day, the patient is the one who suffers, because everybody's mindset is shifted elsewhere and they're thinking about everything else that's going on instead of helping the patients.
Such a good strategy. What I heard there was that if you're a provider, practice, a doctor right now, and you do not have a strategic plan in place, you really need to get something in place, because if you're going to remain competitive in today's environment, you need that plan to make sure you have the right strategies so that you
Right.
can. And if you're thinking about being acquired or you're thinking about
Mm-hmm.
retiring, it's going to raise your valuation because you're going to have all the right steps in place.
Right, exactly. Exactly. It's almost like saying, here's all the financials and how we're performing financially really well. And by the way, this is how we're getting to all of those. This is how we're making all of this happen.
Yes. So speaking of financials and data, often I see leaders sharing a lot of graphs, a lot of data. They have a lot of reports. They're presenting it, but the data is not telling anything. They don't know why they're collecting it. There's no message behind it.
Right.
What are your
Right.
opinions on data and what should be measured and how often?
So I'm a big fan of Microsoft Excel. So I love data in whichever form that you can give it to me and I can digest it. Um, it it will tell a story if you're looking at it correctly, and it depends on which lens you're looking at it from. Um, Oftentimes, I see the staff will come to a meeting with the doctor or doctors, and they'll be responsible for reporting X, Y, and Z. And what it is that they report these numbers, but they don't know how the numbers fit into the bigger picture. So they're reporting, yes, my team did X number of new patient visits. Yes, our team sold this much stuff in skincare, and yes, this is this. But then we're not talking about forecasting. We're not talking about trends. We're just talking about what happened last week. And we can
Everything's in the
set some,
past.
everything's in the past, right? And even if you are forecasting, I love to talk about the false positive. So if you are a business or you're a practice and you are performing decently, so let's just say that your growth is in line with the market growth year over year, whether that's 3%, 6%, 8%, whatever that happens to be, and you are in line with that, be very cautious about that false positive and patting everybody on the back, because what can cause a stagnation as fast as a falling bag of rocks is failure to decide and make decisions. So if your practice is a practice that's very bureaucratic, or it has to go through several layers before something can be approved, this will end up holding you back in the future, because there are other practices out there that are performing with a more agile infrastructure, that are making decisions at a faster pace. They're making decisions with the information that they have. So they're not necessarily making blind decisions. They're making decisions with the information that they have, and then they're going forward and they're looking at it and they're seeing whether or not they need to iterate or pivot. So they constantly have their thumb on the pulse of what's going on. And a lot of times I hear from, let's say, pharma reps or medical device reps in town, where they say, I can't get a meeting with this doctor or this practice manager. They're stopping me at the door. And I caution that every time I walk into a practice, and I say, you have to be able to talk to people. You have to invite those medical device reps, and you have to invite the pharma reps, and you have to see what's out on the market, and you have to hear you have to hear their pitch. Because if you're the one in town that doesn't offer such and such for your patients, but two other practices do, it might be likely that your patients are going to jump ship and they're going to go elsewhere for it. And you just need to have your thumb on the pulse. You have to be careful about the false positive, because there's also market entrants that are coming in. So it's the new guy or the new girl who's setting up a practice within a 5 or 10 mile radius that you might not know about. And sneaky, if they hire somebody like me, they're going to be able to make a very heavy footprint in the sand a lot faster than you think. And although they may not have brand recognition at that time, we will be building it very quickly.
So I think you've provided a lot of details and a lot of information on what practices need to do to remain competitive, how they can have a strategic plan. Do you have any lasting advice or things that you really want to make sure that you share for doctors and providers or their medical staff, or even hospitals that own practices, the executives that own the practices? What words of advice do you want to leave them with?
I just want to remind everyone that hope is not a strategy.
That's my favorite quote.
we
I love that
we
quote.
love to feel like the future will take care of itself and everybody will be great, and trust the journey. But I can tell you, if you really put pen to paper and you formulate a plan, it might not work out step by step, but at least you have set some sort of roadmap for yourself and your business and the health of the future of your business, that it just can't go astray. And remember that if you're going to put this type of responsibility on your practice manager, give him or her the tools to succeed. Whether that means sending them to practice management conferences, whether that means hiring in an outside consultant, make sure this person has the tools they need to succeed, because it's nothing like having this responsibility placed on your shoulders when you're not really sure what to do next, and you're really afraid to tell your employer, hey, I don't know what I'm doing here. It's a lot of stress, and you can't put your head on your pillow at night and feel good about it. So really, give your employees the tools that they need to succeed, send them to the training, hire the right consultant. There are excellent consultants out there. Make sure you find the right one and vet the right one, and you'll really be setting yourself up for success. Strategic planning is not as hard as you think it is, but if you just don't have the time to do it and you need to know more about the what and the how, that's when you need to pick up the phone and reach out. Or if you're shy or it's 2 a.m., send an email. Send an email.
We're all so
We'll get it.
accessible these
We'll call
days.
you.
Direct
We'll call you
message, send
back.
an
Yeah.
email.
Send a text message. Just let somebody know that there is a need in your practice. Vet the people that you're pulling in, and there's good people out there. There really are. I have some counterparts out there that are really killing it, and we're really all trying to make a positive difference for you.
I really like that advice. We often work with, the clinical practice managers when we're called in for workforce optimization or
Yeah.
productivity improvement. And the one thing that they all have in common is they're eager for information. They
Yes.
want the knowledge, they want the data, they want the tools.
Yes.
They want to make sure that they can help run the practice as efficiently as possible and turn it into a
Yes.
very strong business. So they're not trying to be poor performers or, they don't want to have lack of volume. Sometimes they just don't know what to do. So it's so
Right.
important to give them the tools, make sure they have access to the right consultants, the right coaches, build the
Yes.
accountability structure, and really allow them to excel.
Yes, absolutely. It really is. And it's really nerve-wracking, to be honest with you, when you need to approach your employer and just say, this is not my wheelhouse. It's so nerve-wracking. And when I talk to the practice managers, they almost feel guilty about it, to be honest with you. Like I don't have this knowledge. I feel so guilty that I can't help my doctor or my doctor group perform as well. And I just don't know what to do about that. And for me, it's all about teaching. So I come in and I teach you the tools that you need. I teach you the lingo. I make sure that you understand if you're in front of a business consultant and they're using all of this terminology, what does that really mean and what are they really saying? There's a lot of fast talkers out there, and I don't want you to be swayed by somebody who's slick, because when you're in the game for a while, you know how to talk to people and it sounds really great. And then you get somebody in there and it's not so great. So for any practice managers that are watching this, just know that I'm on your side and I'm here to help you. And for the doctors as well, I want you to avoid that physician burnout. And I want you to be able to spend more time with your family and the hobbies that you love so much and feeling less stress at the end of the day, because there's already so much going on in the healthcare sphere and inside your medical practice. One more stress point is probably going to push you over the edge. And I don't want you sitting there, having to deal with physician burnout and all of these other things. So really, I'm here
Yeah,
to help you.
you mentioned one thing that I think is really important is that the practice managers shouldn't be embarrassed to reach out for
Yeah.
help. And I always believe that you should never have embarrassment for a lack of knowledge, but you
Yeah.
should be embarrassed if you have no desire to improve.
Yes, I strongly agree. And that if you're in a position of responsibility, you do have the responsibility to reach out and find whatever it is that you need in order to succeed, whether that's more courses at the local community college or attending more practice management seminars or calling on consultants to help you, whatever it is that you need. There's so many people out there that really want to help you and to help your practice. And in order to get there, you have to be the one to take the first step. I can tell you, I make cold calls and I get hung up on all the time from the front desk people. I can't even get past the front desk people. And when I get a practice manager on the phone, it's very quick. No, we've got it. But I know that maybe that's not the case, and
Maybe they
that's
don't.
okay. Yeah, it's okay. I want you to know that it's okay. And that's why Kick the Ceiling was born. It was born from all of the self-limiting perceptions that held me back, because I was afraid to take those steps in my own life. And that's where the name inherits from, is that the fear of failure and the fear of judgment and, what's going to happen if I put my ideas out there, or basically put myself out there. Are people going to laugh? Are they going to judge me? Is my family going to tell me that I should be doing something different, et cetera, et cetera? And it really holds us back. And don't let it hold you back. You have to be able to take the first step.
So if anyone really found the message resonates with them, they thought this was very valuable, they want to reach out and contact you and talk a little bit further, how do they
Yes.
contact you? Where do they find you?
You can contact me via my LinkedIn profile. You can send me a DM. You can text me or call me directly. I'm on Eastern Time, 321-440-3377. Or like I said, if you're shy or it's 2 a.m., you can always email me at Erin, ERIN, at kicktheceiling.com. That'll come right to my phone, which is normally in my palm unless I'm sleeping. And I'm very responsive, and I will get back to you ASAP. Like I said, I'm on Eastern time, but I operate all hours of the day, to be honest with you. So don't be afraid to pick up the phone. Don't be afraid to send those messages. I'm here to help you with what you need in those business gaps and those choke points. And, let's do this together.
Excellent. So if you found anything in this podcast helpful and there's anything you want to dive into a little bit further, I really encourage you to reach out to Erin. A kick the ceiling concept really is there to help doctors and healthcare, practices elevate and develop the best competitive strategy that they possibly can so that they become as good at business as they are in medicine. But thank you so much for your information today. That's been wonderful. I learned so much from you, and I really look forward to the next conversation.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you, everybody, for taking the time. I really hope I've earned your time today.
Well, thank you, everyone, for listening to ALTIUS Answers. Appreciate your time. You can follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and continue to listen by following the podcast on Spotify. Thank you very much. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to the ALTIUS Answers podcast. For more information on anything you've heard today, please search for ALTIUS on LinkedIn or Facebook, or visit us at our website, www.altiushcg.com. That's www.altiushcg.com. Once again, thanks for listening. We hope to see you again in the future.